Well, okay, my name's Joan Woodard, and I'm the hearing examiner this evening. The purpose of this hearing is to allow me to receive evidence and testimony on the matters that are pending. I make a recommendation only to the county commissioners. I do not make the final decision. I will be submitting my recommendation to staff within 2 weeks after this evening's hearing. The application will then be scheduled for deliberations before the county commissioners. If you wish to give testimony,
You are muted.
If you wish to give testimony, I need you to fill out one of the sheets in the back, and when you come to the podium, please give your name and address for the record before you begin your testimony. First, staff will introduce the application, then we will hear from the applicant. After the applicant's testimony, we will then get into the public comment sheets. We will hear from those who are in favor, those who are neutral, and then those who are opposed. The public not speaking will be read into the record. We will then give the applicant and/or their representative an opportunity for a rebuttal of any testimony stated into the record from the public before we close the public hearing. After that point, we will receive no more testimony. The time limits are 30 minutes for the applicant's presentation, 3 minutes for public testimony, and 15 minutes for applicant rebuttal. I would ask that you direct all of your testimony to me and not to the audience. We have a timer, so your 3 minutes will be noted. It's probably an obnoxious sound, so when you hear that, don't make me have to interrupt you because my mother taught me not to interrupt people, but I'm learning how to do that. If there are no questions about this evening's proceedings, we will begin. Okay. Our first case this evening is case number MSP 23-0003.
Having some technical difficulties right now.
I'm glad I'm not the only one.
Good evening, Madam Hearing Examiner. For the record, Vlad Finkel with Kootenai County Community Development. This is a request for a major subdivision, case number MSP 23-0003, Oakridge Manor by Brady Bruner. The subject parcel of land is 60 acres in size. It's located on the northern part of Kootenai County along Bruner Road. The subject property is fairly level. A portion of it is a field, and the northern portion is a field, and the southern half of it is wooded forested area. The parcel is currently zoned rural, and the comprehensive plan designation is country. As you may know, the rural zoning designation allows for parcels to be as small as 5 acres. In this case, the applicant is proposing a 12-lot major subdivision. Access to the property will be provided via a new internal road intersecting with Bruner Road. It will be constructed to the Associated Highway District standards and dedicated to the public. The water source on each lot will be an individual well, and effluent discharge will be treated via individual septic and drain fields. Based on review of the applicant's submittal packet, we noticed that there were some areas of low-lying or a depression that perhaps could be construed as drainages, natural drainages. We asked the applicant to elaborate on the conditions of the site, physical conditions of the site, and we, in fact, conducted a site inspection with the head engineer on this project. What we concluded is that the area, which is shown on the screen is the lower half or the southern portion of the plat. It's primarily these 6 lots on the south end of the property that have these natural depression areas. And in discussion with the applicant doing the inspection, looking at vegetation, soil conditions, and so forth, we determined that these are not drainages, or these areas are not susceptible to being inundated with water. What we had asked the applicant to do, and it was something that they proposed, is in order to retain them in their natural state and to facilitate development outside of those areas, they would propose a no-build area for any structures. However, it would allow for the construction of access driveways to a residence or any accessory structures. And we concluded that the 5 parcels, or at least I would say 4 or 5 parcels shown on the slide, could easily be developed outside of the no-build area. The northern part of the property is not encumbered by any depression or natural depression areas. As you can see, based on this slide, a portion of the subject property is not located over the Rathdrum Prairie Aquifer. In fact, there are at least 2 lots that are completely outside of the Rathdrum Prairie Aquifer area, and there are 1, 2, 3, you could call it 3 lots that are bisected by the edge of the Rathdrum Prairie Aquifer. As you may know, pursuant to Kootenai County Land Use and Development Code, it requires that any parcel that's being subdivided over the prairie, the applicant must submit a groundwater quantity report to address the potential for domestic water flows. And what it requires is that the geologist review the well records within a half-mile radius, as well as soil condition, to determine whether or not it's possible that newly proposed well on each lot could generate a minimum of 5 gallons per minute flow for a period of 4 hours and a minimum of 1,500 gallons per day. When a property is not located over the Rathdrum Prairie Aquifer, then they have to do a more in-depth hydrogeological analysis to come to the same conclusions. We initially received a response from the applicant that stated that this subdivision lended itself to being able to have adequate water supply for all the lots within this plat. We requested clarification because at least a quarter of the property is not over the aquifer. And in response, an addendum to the groundwater quantity report stated that it is possible that the lots that are outside of the Rathdrum Prairie Aquifer area may produce may have low producing wells, and therefore engineered storage would be required. So as you may have read the report, we have a condition of approval that states for those lots that are not over the aquifer, and we list them, prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy, the future landowners must submit documentation that their wells can produce the minimum requirements per code, or that they have installed an adequate reservoir between 1,500 and 2,500 gallons of water storage in order to serve future residents on the property. And we are commonly including those conditions when we have parcels that are not over the aquifer. As you can see, the property is fairly level except for some minor depression areas on the southern half. During the agency comment period, we solicited comments from all the agencies with jurisdiction. It appears that none of the comments were raised any concerns or could not be sufficiently mitigated with conditions of approval. The most important one, of course, is that the road will have to be constructed to the Associated Highway District standards. The applicants typically, in this case, enter into a road development agreement. It's abbreviated as RDA, where they basically agree to certain terms for the construction of the road, as well as any necessary bonding at the discretion of the Highway District. The Health Department has their septic system requirements. Northern Lakes Fire District has street requirements and signage requirements that are consistent with what the Highway District would require. Everyone else seemed to be on board. Kootenai County Sheriff Office had no major concerns, but they did raise some concerns over the growth that we have experienced in the county and cumulative impact that it has on their department. During the public comment period, we received 2 comments that were neutral and 3 additional comments in opposition of the request. Primarily, the concerns were raised with regards to impacts to wildlife, aquifer, and additional traffic in the area. Those are very common concerns that we get from time to time on major subdivision requests. We do acknowledge those concerns, but this type of development with 12 lots does not rise to the level of having any major concerns in terms of traffic. And had it been a problem, the agencies would have required certain improvements or certain studies such as a traffic impact study or a trip generation analysis to further evaluate the impacts on this request. For the reasons that I just described, we find that this project is compatible with the surrounding development. There are parcels in the area that are 5 acres in size, and this would be consistent with the existing residential development in the area. We ask that should this application be approved, the applicant comply with the agency comments and build the necessary infrastructure to serve this plat. I stand for any questions that you have at this time.
I don't have any of you right now. Glad, thanks.
Okay, I'm not sure if the applicant or their representative are here. I was not able to get a hold of the project engineer who is listed as the applicant on this application, but you may ask if there's anybody here to speak on behalf of the applicant.
Randy's not here, he's out of town, so, but I don't need to speak or anything.
And you are?
Brady Bruner.
Brady, I think it's important that you speak.
Okay.
Excuse me. It's important that Mr. Brady speaks and that he addresses any issues that may arise from the public on rebuttal as well. That way we don't have to postpone the hearing.
Should I wait till the
Yes.
rebuttal though for anything that comes up? Because I think you nailed it on the head.
I think it's
Well,
important that you.
come on up and say that.
Okay.
It's fine.
Yeah. I think.
Name and address for the record.
I'm Brady Bruner. Do you need my address or anything?
Nope.
Okay. I think Vlad touched on everything that I would be touching on. In regards to the building, we addressed that there was an old drainage area, so we're okay with doing the build sites around those, even though they're not actually considered drainages, right? So, and that'll help with the overall aesthetics. We will match everything that's in the area in regards to the houses, craftsman style, and just trying to keep with the overall landscape of the area, so we don't have any, it's sticking out like a sore thumb or anything like that, but yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
And you are fine with all of the proposed conditions of approval?
Yeah, everything that Vlad's come up with, and that we've met all the requirements and everything we need to do, so we have no issues with anything, and just, yeah.
Okay,
Cool. Awesome. Thank you.
thank you. All right, I have Derek, and I apologize for mispronouncing or having a problem with anybody's name, but handwriting is a challenge sometimes. Derek Buddig is in favor and wishes to speak? Oh, I got the wrong one. Sorry, thank you. Brady Bruner.
That's the same.
That was you.
Yep.
Got that. Okay, Kelly Bruner, in favor, does not wish to speak. Charles Fetterman, neutral, may wish to speak. Do you wish to speak?
I think I do.
Okay. Name and address for the record,
Charles Fetterman.
and your address, sir?
No, I'm neutral right now, but
But your residential address is?
yes, right across from the highway that goes through there, that's my house, right there on the other side of the road.
Okay, and I,
Need the actual address in the record. State your address.
447 West Bruner.
okay, thank you.
Okay, sorry, I have hearing disability from the Navy, so
Thank you for your service.
thank you. You're welcome. What I care to say about is About a year ago, electric company came to my house and said, we're gonna disconnect your power momentarily. We're gonna take down your transformer, and I get 400 amps. I have 5 acres there. And they're gonna put it underground, put a new transformer in there, for the new, or the owners. Didn't tell me what they were gonna do. I went back this year and asked, what's going on there? And they said, well, this is gonna happen first. So I just wanted to mention, my driveway is just opposite that new road that will go in. And I've lived there, for a little while here now, and I wanna tell the owners that West Bruner, it's straight from Highway 95, and it has a speed limit of 50 miles an hour. It starts at 35 by the theme park, and then 50. But I can tell you, the people exceed the freeway speed limit at our end of the road. It's 70+ miles an hour. And I'm glad to see a development, and I come in and say, we need some stop signs out here. We need some lower speed limits. And the road goes straight through where Ramsey comes from the south, and it ends on Bruner. And there's flashing red lights for the Ramsey traffic because there's no stop sign there on Bruner. And people just fly through there. I can't believe, I thought I was moving to a rural community, quiet, but I'm glad to see 12 properties go in there and perhaps get some control on the traffic. Something's gonna happen, and I hope they don't end up in a ditch that's in front of my house from that. That's just about what I care to say about it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And I have Ryan Bruner, who's opposed and may wish to speak. You're okay? All right. Do we have anyone on Zoom?
If there's anyone on Zoom that would like to speak to this issue, please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Yes?
I apologize. I just got a text that the Zoom audio isn't working.
Oh,
That's what Randy was.
our wizard over there.
You are unmuted.
Is there anyone on Zoom that would like to speak to this issue? If so, please unmute yourself and go ahead. Apparently not.
Doesn't appear that anybody else wishes to speak on Oakridge Manor.
Is there anyone on Zoom that could just respond and tell me that you are actually hearing me? Like Mr. Slaughter?
Hello, this is Paul.
Paul?
Yeah, this is Paul. I can hear you. I was having trouble earlier, but now I can hear.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. And with no further public testimony, Brady, do you have any final comments you would like to make?
I mean, I couldn't really hear what you were saying, but I believe it was on.
Microphone, please, sorry.
I believe it was on traffic down that road, because that's something we
Yes.
thought about. So maybe I'll just throw this out there, because I had heard some stuff from Randy, and if he was here, he could elaborate a little more. But was there ever a turnoff area on Bruner that was ever recommended or anything? Vlad?
For the record, Vlad Finkel with Kootenai County Community Development. We did not receive any comments from Lakes Highway District that would indicate the need for any improvements to Bruner Road itself. And they did not raise any concern over existing traffic or any additional traffic attributed to this proposal.
Still a stop sign at the end of the road though.
As I understand, the highway district will impose the necessary signage pursuant to their requirements.
But, perhaps residents in the area can communicate with Lakes Highway District and share your concerns with them. That might be helpful. Okay?
Thank you.
All right. Then that concludes this evening's hearing on case number MSP 23-0003. And now we will move to case number CUP 24-0003. Oop, yeah. I see that I just got a blue sheet for Tom Bruner. You filled out the wrong form, yeah. We had closed the hearing. So I can't take any more testimony, I'm sorry. Okay. All right, thank you.
Madam Hearing Examiner, he can always send us his comments and we can include that to the packet to the board.
I think he indicated that he did send them in with the original
Okay.
query that the project was open for comment, yes? Sent something in writing. But if you haven't, and you have more things you'd like to say, you can send an email into staff.
That's all correct, Ms. Hearing Examiner. You may open the hearing again if you want, but you're certainly not required to.
Okay.
Once again, for the record, Vlad Finkel with Kootenai County Community Development. This is a request for a conditional use permit case number CUP 24-0003 for a wireless communication facility, AKA cell tower. The project is called Trekker Ridge. The underlying property owner is Mr. Hughes. Verizon Wireless and Horizon Towers are also involved in their request. And all of the individuals are listed in the project file online who are part of this application. The property is 20 acres in size. It's located on the east side of Kootenai County near the intersection of Highway 3 and I-90. Not really near, but in the proximity of. I would like to clarify that. It does take quite some time to get to the project site, but that's the approximate location of it. The parcel is heavily vegetated. It's located at the top of the mountain, and it does have some slope conditions. The parcel is currently zoned agriculture, and the comp plan designation is scenic. I would like to add into the record that the same request for a wireless communication facility was approved in 2016 on a parcel directly to the south of the subject site, which is also under the ownership of Mr. Hughes. At that time, the department did not have any comments or any concerns raised by the public or agencies. That project was approved in 2018 with the expiration date for the establishment of improvements or the use that had to occur within a 24-month period after the initial approval. That is a condition that we place on every conditional use permit request. That's part of our land use and development code requirement. The applicant had reached out to us, I believe, early this year and asked whether or not the initial application would still be active and could they pursue this. And I advised them that it has long expired and they would need to initiate a brand new application in order to pursue this if they chose to. It was my understanding when they made the initial application that their request was going to be on the same site. However, when the applicant made submitted an application with a site plan, I discovered that the proposed tower was shifted north to the adjoining parcel on the adjoining 20-acre parcel to the north. I immediately contacted the applicant. I said, is that the correct location of the new cell tower? And is this what you want to move forward with? And they said, correct. And they reapplied on the accurate parcel because the initial application was on the adjoining parcel to the south. Once the new application was submitted, we made it very clear that at this point, we would review the application for completion and sufficiency review, and then vested under our current rules and regulations as long as the fees were paid, which was done back, I believe, in late March of this year. This next slide is the depiction of the project site as well as the road, the existing road that leads up to the property through the adjoining 3 parcels, the parcel to the south, and 2 adjoining parcels to the east, which all 4 of these are under the ownership of Mr. Hughes and his wife. They have granted access and right of entry to the proposed tower site. Furthermore, the road continues on north on the adjacent parcel, which is under the ownership of Stimson Lumber, and it eventually intersects with Poplar Road, which is a public right-of-way. We did receive an access easement, and we did receive this is the next slide shows the location of the roads with meets and bounds. We did confirm with the project applicant and their surveyor that the location of this road is fully within the meets and bounds of the Stimson Lumber site, that it doesn't encroach on any adjoining parcels of land. Therefore, only the applicant as well as Stimson Lumber had to submit or had to approve an access easement for the benefit of this cell tower. The tower will be a lattice tower, which will be 150 feet in height. It will allow for co-location of 3 additional antennas as required per our code. The tower will be painted arugula green to blend in with the existing natural environment in the area, and so that there's very little visual disturbance from the project area. The applicant was also required to submit a radio frequency map showing the existing coverage and the potential coverage with the new cell tower location. This is the location of the cell tower and the existing conditions for coverage. And as you can see, there's extensive gap in coverage that will be addressed with this map that they provided as part of their application. I don't know if I need to get into the specifics of this, nor do I know the mathematics or the computations of how they derived to this current map depiction, but that's something you may ask the applicant and their representative. These are some of the photos and photo simulations of the proposed cell tower and location. I had a hard time seeing any impact because this tower is located at the top of a mountain, and I would assume that the location of the photos or the location of where the photos were taken are a significant difference or a significant distance away from the actual cell tower site on a public right-of-way. So really, you can't even tell that the tower is located on that site. During the agency comment period, we received comments from all the agencies of the jurisdiction. I found it interesting that the Shoshone County Fire District Chief stated that he supports this request and approves of it because it's a necessity for emergency reasons. Division of Idaho Transportation Department, Division of Aeronautics did not raise any issues, neither did Coeur d'Alene Airport. The the FAA determination stated that the registration not required. Kootenai County Community Development had building permit requirements as always, and really no other questions, concerns, or conditions were placed on this applicant based on their review. During the public comment period, we received only one comment in support and one comment in opposition of the request. The individual who opposed the request did not elaborate on their position. And I stand for any, excuse me. So based on the information that was provided as part of the record and based on the previous approval, we find that this application should be approved, that it will fit within the area. It will not be a detriment to the adjoining parcels of land, and that this is a necessity for emergency reasons other than just providing gap in coverage for public use. I stand for any questions that you have at this time for me.
I don't have anything for you right now, Vlad. Thank you. Okay, then, do we have the applicant?
Hi, my name is Derek Budig. I represent Horizon Wireless on behalf of, or Horizon on behalf of Verizon Wireless. I'd like to introduce.
And your address for the record?
My address is 7322 North Walnut Court, Spokane, Washington.
Thank you.
I'm here in collaboration with Paul Slotemaker, AICP, Tilson Technologies, also representing Verizon. Stephen Kennedy is the RF engineer. Mike Mathieson is here representing Horizon Tower. Shelley Neese, Galt Enterprises, Super Technical Services, and Josh Leonard, the attorney with Clark Waddell LLP, all of whom wish to speak. And I'll let him get the. Okay, got that. All right, I've introduced the team. Again, all of these folks wish to speak on behalf of Verizon Wireless and Horizon Tower for this proposal. As Vlad pointed out, the parcel numbers listed above. It's a 20-acre parcel owned by Joel and Carol Hughes. The zoning is agricultural. The comprehensive designation is country. We have a zoomed out view of the subject parcel, which is off the Rose Lake exit, south of I-90, where there's a significant gap in coverage, which has prompted the need for this facility. There's a zoomed in view, which I think we've already seen. And from here, I believe I'm going to hand this, well, I'll go a little bit more into detail on the subject property. Vlad did a nice job of explaining the access and the site itself. It's a 150-foot self-support tower. It's very non-intrusive in terms of views. It's going to be highly effective, again, in an area where we have a significant gap in coverage along I-90. There's probably 4 or 5 miles where you just don't get a signal, as most of you have probably experienced. In any case, from here, I'm going to turn this over to Josh Leonard, and he's going to take it.
Thank you, Derek. Appreciate it. Madam Hearing Examiner, Josh Leonard. My address is 251 East Front Street, Suite 310. That's in Boise, 83702. As Vlad noted, there's an existing road that has been in this part Vlad didn't know, but this road has been in continuous use as long as the historic beacon that's up there has been not in operation, but as long as it has existed. That's shown in green on the slide here. Let's see if we can get this. Backwards, forward, okay. As Vlad also noted, the easement that provides access to the site and that has provided that access for as long as that beacon's been in place was erroneously called into question by neighbors opposed to the project. Neighbors contacted county staff and provided incorrect or incomplete information, arguing that the easement wandered onto their property. Staff contacted the applicant. Applicant reached out to its surveyor and provided information from the licensed surveyor confirming that the easement is not on the Kramer's property. This is from our surveyor, and I'm going to interpret it just a little bit because it's an interesting quote. He says, "We do not have the road crossing onto the Kramer property." In other words, it's that he doesn't see that the road crosses onto the Kramer property. We also have Vlad's email back to the Kramers that staff cannot conclude the road is actually within the geographical boundaries of your property. And that's not to the applicant, that's to the complaining party. And I spoke with Vlad beforehand, before the meeting today, and he clarified that a little bit, said that the legal department has asked the staff to not take a position, just to go on what's in the record. And what's in the record to date is the licensed surveyor's determination that it does not wander onto the Kramer property. Another view of access, this was highlighted, I believe, by the surveyor. The access issue really is a red herring, Madam Hearing Examiner. It's an attempt by those opposed to the tower to try to find a basis, a reasonable basis to deny the tower. And it's, again, just a red herring. It's been disproven, and there's nothing in the record to suggest that it does anything but what the licensed surveyor said it does, which is provide access without wandering onto the Kramer's property. Tower site plan, a little bit more detail you can see here. The tower in the middle has a triangle. It's a lattice tower, a self-supporting tower, within a 40 by 60 foot lease area, with some ground equipment and a diesel generator. Diesel generator is there, obviously, in case of power outage when emergency contact is necessary. Here's an elevation view from two different directions, the south and the west. This is in the packet. It also shows the approximate height of trees in the area. I say approximate height. The packet itself, in what we call the zoning drawings, which look like a survey with construction drawings, has a tree plan in it that shows the heights of these trees, and some of them are as high as 90 feet, which is one of the reasons why this tower needs to be 150 feet tall, to get those lowest antennas well above the 90 feet trees, so that it can project its signal as it's supposed to. Photo simulations, Vlad mentioned, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them because they really aren't very helpful because they don't show the tower. This tower is not seen from the vantage points that we were asked to obtain those photo sims. As you can see here, before and after, we had to put a point or point an arrow to show you where the tower would be shown. I'd also note for the record that these are scaled. They're not just drawn in using a pen and paper. These are scaled. They're done using, I would say, math, but I don't know exactly what type of math. I went to law school to avoid all of the math that involves letters. But it was done by engineers, and it was done to scale to show the height of the tower. I zoomed in here just so you can see a little bit. Does this have a laser pointer, Vlad? You can see right there is the very top of the tower just peeking through. Again, though, to go back, from a casual observer's perspective, it's impossible to see. You'd have to be looking for it. At the second view, here again, I zoomed in a little bit to try to show it where you can see it. It really is, for all intents and purposes, invisible, because it's below the horizon of the treetops. Not, again, and this one actually, it just says on the photo simulation itself, tower not visible from this location. So it just wasn't there at all. I'm going to turn some time over to Stephen Kennedy. He's the independent or outside radio frequency engineer. Probably the bulk of the time that we're gonna spend here today is talking about the needs analysis for this site, and Mr. Kennedy's here to do that. Down is forward.
Good evening, Madam Hearing Examiner. My name's Steve Kennedy, 18756 West Luke Avenue, Litchfield Park, Arizona. I'm a radio frequency consulting engineer, and I'm coming up on 35 years doing this. So I did both the RF design analysis of what the Verizon RF engineer designed, and I also performed a drive test, and I'll speak to that as it comes along. I kind of geek out on this stuff, so I'll try to keep it moving and not glaze anybody's eyes over, but I get excited about it. Coverage versus capacity. 2 reasons wireless carriers build sites. One's coverage. Coverage is the ability for the transceiver in the phone to talk to the transceiver on the site. It's the ability to make a connection. Back when I started in this business, all you could do on a phone was talk. Very little bandwidth requirements, not very much. Now, a whole lot more bandwidth requirements. Capacity is the ability to process data. And an example I use, an everyday example, is a water pipe. So if you have a water pipe going to your house, you have 100% of the capacity of that water pipe. If someone taps that water pipe, you now have 50% of the capacity. If 2 more people tap it, you have 25%. If 4 more people tap it, you have 12.5%. A radio channel is, if you imagine a radio channel as a water pipe, the more users in the area, the more it slices up that bandwidth capacity and the less throughput or bits per second per unit is provided. So that's capacity needs. The objective is coverage in Rose Lake, Canyon, Dudley areas. The big coverage example is I-90. When I was drive testing that area, I was like, I hope the car doesn't break down. I don't want to get stuck out here and not be able to make a phone call. Provide service to areas around I-90 and Highway 3, and provide capacity throughput in Rose Lake and around Highway 90 and I-3. Everybody owns a cell phone, 96% of Americans, 57% of American homes rely exclusively on cell phones, and 84% or more of 911 emergency calls are made from mobile devices. Once again, 150-foot self-support tower, Verizon will be at 146 foot for their center line. Why here? Significant gap in service on I-90, 5 miles, a significant gap, and I'll prove that with drive test data to show you exactly what's going on for multiple carriers. There's a significant amount of growth within Idaho. COVID made everybody move and go out rural, and so there's a lot more utilization happening. Zoom of the proposed site. This is the distance from the proposed site to the current Verizon sites. So we can see the closest site is 10.06 miles away. The farthest site is 14.65 miles away. A lot of distance. With the terrain you guys have up here and the foliage, those sites do not provide service within this area. Once again, my drive test will show that data. Verizon Cell Mapper is a third-party crowdsourced data. So this is where drive tests are done using equipment and vans. The red circle shows the area of service that this site will help with. And we can see that if you're down in the red or the orange or the dark green, that you're less than mobile, you're less than outdoor service. It's lick your finger, stick it in the air, and hope for the best. You might get a call. A zoom of that shows the proposed site versus the actual raw data from mobile reported driving. This is another open source crowdsourced data. If you load programs like Facebook, you have a Facebook app on your phone, you give them all sorts of, yes, you can load this, that. One of the things loaded is a thin client. This thin client, whenever the mobile connects to the network and does anything, whether you talk, there's some background information happening on an app, anything, it reports the quality of service towards the servers for this crowdsourced data. So the coverage reports, we're showing a lack of coverage reports in the area, and that's basically because there's no service to be able to provide a coverage report. This is Ookla data. This is another crowdsourced data. This is data showing up directly from the carriers. It's a little hard on the zoom, but if you look within the area of what the proposed is going to do, you're going to see a lot of red symbols and orange symbols and some really dark red symbols. All those symbols, and I'll talk to that when we get to the propagation modeling, is basically no service to little service to hope for the best. That's about all that's going on. And so you see below neg 100 and neg 100 dBm to neg 106 is going to be outdoor service. Below that, service is unreliable and marginal at best. You can see on the zoom a whole lot more reports traveling along I-90 where there's a whole lot of red, and that's the neg 110 to neg 120 dBm RSRP. So there's a lot of bad service within the area, a significant gap. So this is a legend I'm talking about. So what this legend means is green is indoor service. Indoor service is buildings, right? There's bricks, there's wood, there's stucco, there's all sorts of things that stop things coming into it, brick, whatever. That's where we show that the probability of indoor coverage. Anywhere we see green on the maps, that means 95% probability we're going to have service within the building. Yellow is 95% probability we'll have service in the vehicle. And then red is on street or open field. You're out in your front yard, working on your garden, whatever. That's on street. You can see the levels, neg 85, neg 95, and neg 106. Those are pretty much industry standards. And these are levels that the FCC actually uses when they're allocating dollars for broadband funding. So we have two different frequency bands that wireless carriers work at. The low band modeling, so a low band frequency is going to be 700 megahertz, 850 megahertz. This has a better propagation to be able to go a larger area as well as penetrate walls. So this is what low band does. It's a great thing, but only about 90% of the spectrum allocated to wireless carriers is low band. So we're going to get more coverage out of low band than we get out of mid band, and I'll talk about mid band in a moment. So this is the proposed site in the area. So once again, we see the green, we see the yellow, we see the red. So we see indoor probability, in-vehicle probability, on-street probability, and then lack of service. And it's a significant area with lack of service. So when a carrier engineer designs a search ring, they look at what's the target coverage area, what can we do about the site to get the best service for that area, and how can we make it work well. So we have a lot of impact from terrain and clutter. If you've ever drove I-90 in this area, you notice the terrain all over the place. So we try to get a site because frequencies work on line of sight, so the ability to see. So just like your eyes and your head see out to a view, the same thing with the antennas. RF, that you can't lob RF over a mountain. It doesn't work that way. You have to have line of sight. So when we designed a search ring, the carrier engineer wanted to see as much of the interstate as possible, as well as Highway 3 to the south and the people around the site. So that's the decision to go with, let's go up at this part of the hill. So this is low band proposed, and once again we go back and we look at existing and what that site's going to do to help bridge the coverage, a very significant impact. So if we do a comparison side by side, it's pretty straightforward. Mid-band modeling. This is frequency bands. We're talking about 1900 megahertz, 2100 megahertz, 2500 megahertz. Those are bands that, like I said, about 90% of the carrier's spectral capacity and bandwidth is in mid-band. Mid-band, like if you look at low band has a very small channel. It's only about 10 megahertz wide. You get into mid-band, you can get up to 25 megahertz, 30 megahertz channels. It can get quite large. So you get a lot more bandwidth, a lot more capacity, but it just doesn't cover as far. So if we look at mid-band and where the site is placed, and we look at the next slide, we're going to get not quite as good coverage out of mid-band that we get out of low band. So once again, a side-by-side comparison, as is with proposed, a significant difference. This is zoom on the proposed site. I went ahead and did some imports into Google Earth from the propagation model, just to kind of see what's going on. There's a little bit of coverage on the east side of that hill just because it's higher up in terrain. So you're going to see that's going to get some energy that way from the site to the east. And here's the proposed. So if you go back and look, you can kind of spot where some of the houses are, where the Highway 3 is, the exit, and come back and look and go, okay, significant impact. It's going to make a significant impact. I mean, we're talking 5 miles of gap in service. It's large. It's very large. I also kind of bring in and look at AT&T as well, and I'll talk about that in the drive data. So the proposed site, the closest AT&T site is 5.5 miles away, and then the farthest is 14.48 miles away. And I'll show you what kind of, from the drive data, what AT&T is doing, being 5.5 miles away, and what they're providing within the area. All right, so once again, AT&T cell mapper. you can look and see that they've got the same problem. They're not providing coverage in this area. They're down to neg 140s on their RSRP, and that's almost non-existent to where the scanner can't decode a signal. Then we have the AT&T quality map with the open signal data. Once again, we're getting a lot of data reports from the mobiles directly, from the user, showing not good service, lack of coverage. We look at the Ookla data, and we see the same thing, a whole lot of red, a whole lot of dark red, and just a little bit of orange, but more towards the west. So in the proposed area of the site, it's horrible. All right, this is T-Mobile. Closest site for T-Mobile is 5.5 miles away. Farthest is 14.65. And same thing's going on. They don't have a lot of service. T-Mobile's open signal, same thing. Very, very little data points showing. And then this is the Ookla data for T-Mobile showing a whole lot of red, which is marginal to non-existent. So my recommendation is there's poor service for all three carriers. Even though AT&T and T-Mobile are 5.5 miles away, they're still not providing a level of service within the area. The mobiles are reporting poor quality. Area's got a significant gap, 5 miles, and it's worse in mid-band than it is in low band, so I'd recommend approval for the proposed. Second thing to do to prove significant gap in service. So propagation models are great. They do a lot of math. They take into account things like path loss. They take into account antenna gains, powers, terrain, clutter. Clutter can be like large buildings or smaller buildings or houses or shacks or whatever it is. And then they take into foliage. So trees have a significant impact as well. So what we do is, that's a great, it's a modeled software, it's been optimized with drive test data, but it's a model. So the only really good way to tell is drive data. Drive data tells you exactly what's going on out in the field. You get it real world. There's no interpretation. The scanner's telling you what it's seeing, and that's exactly what I did. I used a PCTEL G-Flex scanner, which is pretty much an industry standard scanner. Plopped it on the rent car, put an antenna on the roof, and got a GPS going and took a drive. The reason for the drive test was to validate what's going on with the models and to show that the models are true, that they're not lying, that they're actually telling you what's going on in the real world, in the field. And the test was completed on June 26, 2024. So this is the route that I drove. I drove a pretty significant amount of miles, cruising all the way up and down the roads. And a lot of back roads and inroads in and out of things. Quite a beautiful area. And that was what I did for the route, because I wanted to get a good, okay, if I'm trying to validate the model, I want to go cover where the model's saying I'm covered. All right, so once again, distance to the Verizon sites. And this is the low band scanner data zoom for the drive test that I did. And I added if you look at the upper right, you see the legend. Green is in building, yellow's in vehicle, red's on street, blue is marginal. Marginal means sometimes you're going to get service depending on the capacity, environment of the system, how much noise is going on in the broadband network, and also just how things are doing, and if you're behind a tree, in front of a tree, whatever. There's all sorts of things that can impact coverage. So we can see that there's a whole lot of marginal to no service within the area, and if you look up along I-90, it's significant northeast, north, and west of the site. You've got a little bit of in-vehicle coverage and a little bit of outdoor coverage along the interstate there, but on the east side, but just not as good. Okay, here's the distance to the AT&T sites. Once again, that's the 5.5 mile site to the west, and we bring in the data zoom. We're getting close to the same marginal to no service within the area, even though AT&T is 5.5 miles away. It's not providing. Why is that happening? Terrain and foliage. That's our biggest hits. That's our impacts. So even with AT&T being 5.5 miles away, it's not providing the service in the area. So it's not only Verizon has an issue, it's now AT&T has an issue as well. And we look at T-Mobile. T-Mobile, once again, the same tower that AT&T is on, and then it's 14.65 miles to the east. T-Mobile's pretty much about all of its marginal no service, and that's just because the distance from those sites to that area. So this is a significant impact, a significant gap in service, and this drive data proves that my models are pretty spot on. So they're showing that there is no service, and the models are showing that, yeah, it's correct, there is no service. So the conclusion is the scanner decoded all three carriers. Low band showed a significant gap in service. Mid-band especially showed a significant gap in service. The amount of mid-band was significantly less. I showed you most of the low band because it proves the point of the drive data showing that there's no service. And then the drive test scanner validates the models that have shown in the propagation models that I provided for you. And I recommend approval of the proposed. I'm going to pass this back, and I stand for questions at any time. You haven't, just yell. I'm going to pass this back to Josh. He's going to talk about the next set.
Josh Leonard again. Do I need to give my address again? Okay. Oh, now I have to remember it. 251 East Front Street, Suite 310, Boise 83702. I want to really quickly cover or talk about online coverage maps. All of the major carriers and even the minor carriers offer advertising online or provide advertising online showing coverage in a particular area. The two things I want to highlight for Verizon's are, first, that it talks about 4G LTE. It's showing 4G LTE coverage throughout the area. You can kind of make out the I-90 through here, but there you can see there is no 5G coverage. Also, I want to point to this disclaimer. This disclaimer, it includes a lot, it's obvious a lawyer wrote it, right? This map applies to voice and data plans and is a general prediction of where we expect to deliver outdoor service at the cell edge based on typical human walking speeds without factoring in loading, the number of people simultaneously using the service in an area, or throughput. It's not a guarantee of coverage, contains areas of no service, and may not reflect actual customer performance. Actual coverage may vary. There's a version of that for AT&T. There's a version of that for T-Mobile. The point I want to make with regard to this, the first point, I want to describe it like this. The difference between the online coverage maps that we see, I'm going to stop on Verizon's because that's the most applicable here today. The difference between this and what you've heard from Stephen Kennedy is that this is based on RF data, but was created by a marketing team, as opposed to Mr. Kennedy, who took the raw data, analyzed it, and produced easily digestible visual aids showing what coverage is in those areas. And the drive tests that he performed confirm the modeling that he also did. Kennedy's analysis is specific to this site and expert, as opposed to a general online advertisement. Potential sites, let's go down to the next topic. Potential alternate sites ruled out. Something I found very interesting about Kootenai County's code. Kootenai County's code requires the applicant to demonstrate that existing wireless communications facilities were considered and ruled out, whether because the engineering didn't work, they wouldn't support another set of antennas, or they just wouldn't serve the area that needed to be covered. Kootenai County Code does not require us to demonstrate that other bare ground sites were considered. Interestingly, and this is something that I think is fairly unique to Kootenai County Code, that only comes into play if we don't meet the application requirements, and then you have to look at whether denying it would be a violation of the Telecommunications Act of 1996. Bare ground sites are not required to be examined. Although not required, we did look at them. We wanted to show that we had made a good faith effort into locating this on several different places, just to ensure that we had the best place, and we could show that to both the public and to Madam Hearing Examiner and to the Board of County Commissioners. So based on Verizon's engineers' review and also confirmation by Stephen Kennedy, this site was selected because it maximizes coverage of the target service area. But that's not the only reason. It's also because this site, as shown in those photo simulations, was the least visually intrusive. Another interesting thing about Kootenai County's code is that it doesn't say it has to be invisible. It says that it has to be of a color or type that best blends in. Not that it entirely blends in, that it best blends in. Another reason, among the potential alternate sites, this was the only one that met the criteria to be a viable potential alternate site candidate. What do I mean by that? The first point is carrier search ring. Where does the carrier need service? The carrier is, as Mr. Kennedy said, is getting pings from phones. It's also conducting its own analysis of where coverage is poor. Based on all of that, they determine where they need a site. Then they look at existing sites. And I'll tell you, Verizon is just like the other major carriers. The first thing they do is look to see if there's an existing site because it's by far the cheapest way to go about doing this. The next, if it's zoned for a tower. If it's not zoned for a tower, and by zoned for a tower, I'm sure Madam Hearing Examiner knows, but just for the record, that it's either allowed as a matter of right or it's allowed with a conditional use permit. If it's not zoned for a tower, can it be without having to go through a bunch of hoops? And then dimensional standards. Can the setbacks be met? That's primarily that's the primary dimensional standard. But in Kootenai County, it also has a maximum height of 150 feet. So we have to be able to fit a tower under that ceiling that will serve that area, the targeted service area. Something we run into more and more are CCNRs, and whether CCNRs would prohibit it. Practical concerns, including the grade, power, existing improvements, things that we might have to demo, or other things we might have to take care of in order to put a tower there. And then access, the site accessible, and if there's existing access. The hardest one of all of these is a willing landowner. And in this case, it's the same landowner that was willing in 2018. They just wanted it on a different part of their property this time, and that's why the shift. Alternate sites that were considered, and this is really small, and I apologize, but I want to point out to Madam Hearing Examiner. Please look at this later. The reasons for, and I should have made this bigger, but the reasons why these different properties were turned. If I can have one more minute just to close out. The reasons why they were not viable are here on the right-hand side. So as you're conducting your review of that, I think what I'm going to do is pause here and obviously pause because the timer is rung, but reserve some for rebuttal if that's okay.
That's fine.
Thank you, Madam Hearing Examiner.
I do have a few questions for you guys at this
Certainly.
stage, though, and you guys decide who's best to answer. I'm wondering about the impact of satellite communications being available, because I have friends who live out in this area, and that's how they're getting their connectivity.
In satellite communications, when we talked about line of sight earlier, right, it's the one that's over the hill. Satellite communications are great. I've worked in the satellite industry. I did the first voice over IP network engineering for a satellite network. They're really great, but they're limited on bandwidth, and they're limited to where you have to have an external antenna outside to be able to get access to the site, because that transmitter is so far away, the path loss from that transmitter all the way down to the transceiver on the ground is significant. So satellite, yes, positive thing, creates impacts, does not provide the mobility that most of the people use, because this is a mobile network, right? This is a mobile phone. So we don't get the mobility, and we don't get the throughput that we see, or we wouldn't get in satellite the throughput that we see on the terrestrial-based networks.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Okay, so I assume that by showing the data for AT&T and T-Mobile, that explains why roaming's not working, because there's no place to roam
Yeah, there's nobody to go roam to.
It's not that you guys have lost a relationship or something like that.
No, ma'am.
I'm curious, because of what you showed, it looks like there's still a huge gap of coverage between this site, if you get this site, and further east.
Yes, ma'am, there is. There's, to be able to bridge all of the gaps, I would just, by knowledge of the area, I would estimate 2 to 3 more towers to be able to cover the whole area of I-90 within that section.
I hear through the grapevine that you guys are using a lot of drones these days for maintenance and making sure that towers are in good shape?
Drones, there's a requirement that each year a tower be inspected. Some carriers have decided to use drones and visual using LiDAR, laser imaging, radar imaging, other things to be able to view it. But in order to check the connections, the bolts, and make sure they're meeting everything, you typically need a human to shimmy up the tower and check everything and make sure it's right. So drones are being utilized. In fact, I've flown many drones myself on proposed new sites to see what's the site going to do, because if I can get a drone up in the air and look, I can see what the camera and I can see what I think the antennas are going to do. So I'm very experienced with that. But as far as inspections, drones are great, love it. I like having a human go up and check the bolts and make sure they're right.
So there's like monthly maintenance that somebody shows up to the site once a month?
So there's a ground-based technician that'll show up once a month and do preventative maintenance, just check on the radios. Back when I started in business, it was a 12 by 28 shelter full of radios. Now it's the size of a computer. And so they're more modular, a lot easier to do. So technicians only usually have to visit once a month. If there's an outage, they're going to be out more often. But it's typical, once the site's constructed and done, it's a once-a-month kind of thing, unless there's construction going on for additional tenants.
And then you're certifying once a year, is that where?
Yes, ma'am, typically.
And your generator, is that diesel?
It is diesel. Yes, ma'am, it is diesel.
You've got once a month testing?
It cycles once a week for about 8 to 15 minutes, depending on what the carrier requires. And it's just, kicks up on, runs, everything's good, sends alerts back to the switching center to say, hey, I did my job, you don't need to send somebody out to look at me. And then, of course, if power outage goes, the transfer switch kicks and the generator's running the site.
But they'll be out to replenish the
Yes, ma'am.
tank periodically for that too?
The tank's always replenished to make sure that just in case something happens, that the site's ready to go. So I can't remember the total amount of gallons on one. Depending on the size generator, they can be anywhere from 75 to 150 gallons of diesel. But it's all within the EPA's requirements for a fixed generator.
I would imagine that your other competitors will look at your tower as one they'd want to co-locate
Yes,
on,
ma'am.
yeah?
That happens a lot. When a tower company builds a tower and they build it with an anchor tenant, usually the other two guys show up within a few years, just because, and especially in an area like this where this is a really good site, ma'am. It's a really good site. And so the other two carriers are probably going to show interest and want to attach to that site as well.
Okay, that's all I have at the moment.
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
All right. Okay. Time for public comment. I have Steve Meyer, who is in favor and wishes to speak.
My name is Steve Meyer, and I live at 10,500 Hayden Bluff Lane in Hayden Lake. The Congress and the FCC has concluded that a national objective is to have universal data services across the whole country. They've also designed a scheme where universal service for electricity and telephones in the 1930s was achieved by allowing monopolies in various geographic areas to maximize the use of the capital. We decided we wouldn't do that with data services, and so we have multiple competitors in the data service business, all financed by private capital without any government regulation on how it's financed and built. The result is that urban areas have many carriers and excellent service, and rural areas, like most of Idaho, have modest service, I guess is a good way to put it. So I'm here tonight to make the case that in spite of public concerns about cell towers, radiation issues, visual objections, Everybody wants their cell phone to work. And so the notion that I don't want a tower in my neighborhood, but I want my cell phone to function everywhere is an example that just doesn't fly, doesn't work. And so I would urge you and the Planning and Zoning Commission and the county commissioners to recognize that the contrast between reservations for many reasons and having our cell phones work, we've all become accustomed to cell phones as being intermittent devices. And, you know, in many other electronic stuff, like your personal computer, if it doesn't work, you feel like you're really annoyed. Yet with your cell phone, you're willing to accept it. So if you drive to Moscow, if you do it very often, you know, or to Lewiston, even to Spokane, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So my presence tonight is just to urge you to recognize that for the small inconvenience of being able to see it, cell towers for both voice communications to phones and data communications to residences are part of our lives. And it's not fair for the people in the urban part of the country to enjoy the service and those of us in the rural areas to not enjoy the same data service. Thanks.
Thank you. Erica Perkins, neutral and opposed, and may wish to speak.
I'm a resident of Hayden, but I own land nearby.
Okay,
You need my
name and
physical
address for
address?
the record.
10064 North Reed Road, Hayden.
Name as
Oh,
well.
Erica Perkins. Sorry, I just figured you said it, sorry. When is the time frame on this? When is your?
Please direct your comments
Oh,
to me.
sorry, I don't know which one to talk to. The time frame. When is the anticipation of this to be started, duration of how long it's gonna take, and when is it to be, finished?
We'll hope they'll address that in the rebuttal for you.
Oh, okay, so we don't know that, because that kind of like infects erosion in the area and our wildlife in the area. Definitely flat out lies about the whole cell phone service in the area. I've carried calls over the past, so just because you have some fancy data doesn't really show the truth. I was broke down out in the woods, rural area last weekend, flat tire, had cell phone service with my son. So I don't know where you're getting that. I've been a resident of Kootenai County pretty much my whole life, in Shoshone County. Yeah, so I guess that's some of my questions. Is it gonna be 5G that is anticipated to go in then?
They'll make a note and
Okay.
address
I
it.
have a question on that too. Yeah, and what is the impact on like the wildlife if you've got like a diesel generator running up there, 75 to 100 gallons? That's like gonna last you, I don't know, half a month to run that thing? A gallon, you can probably run a gallon of gasoline on a generator for like a day. Yeah, and if you're gonna do 2 or 3 more towers, is that gonna be right next to it? Is it gonna be close? Is it not gonna be close? And yeah, I've had AT&T and Verizon. I have cell service in those areas. I'll admit, there's a few places it's not as great, but there's a lot of service in the areas that they're saying there isn't, so I don't know.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
thanks.
John Kramer, opposed, wishes to speak.
John Kramer, 10685 South Poplar Street, Cataldo, Idaho. All right, these guys over here, they're trying to say the road doesn't come on my property, but there has been a recent survey done in 2019. The monument's in the ground. Vlad over there says monuments mean nothing to him, so why he even talks about people's property, I have no idea. If you don't know what a fucking monument is, you shouldn't be telling people where their property lines are. All the landowners around there agree that that's my property line, even Stimson. So that's the end of it. You're not coming across my property. I did 18 months in the sandbox. I ain't afraid to go to war. Done.
Thank you for your testimony. Rodney Cochran, opposed, may wish to speak.
My name is Rodney Cochran. I live at 16035 South Winton Road in Cataldo. I own the parcel identified as RP 46 North, 1 West, 26 3900, directly to the south and west of the parcel the tower is going to be on. So far tonight, we have heard a lot of conversation, testimony from folks that aren't from the area. Even a speaker here tonight got up and spoke about how good data services could and should be for us in the rural area, speaking from a urban area. Some of us have chose our lives out in this neighborhood for a reason. It's a little simpler, a little easier. Dating back a few years ago, Kootenai County was going through a comprehensive plan rewrite, okay? At that point in time, my property had been turned into 40 acres and larger, which had me having one structure per 40 acres on my 80. There are studies out there now, well, I should qualify that with saying that lowers my property value. I'm against anything that lowers my property value. There are studies out there that show that a cell tower within 1,000, 1,200 feet of your property has the potential to lower your property value by up to 10%. That is a concern for me. So if there's any rebuttal to those statements, I would be happy to hear them this evening.
Thank you. Kayla Kramer, opposed, may wish to speak.
Kayla Kramer, 10685 South Poplar Street, Cataldo, Idaho, 83810. I'm obviously a Kramer that they are saying was a red herring, saying that we don't want the tower, and so we're making up reasons to not get it there. This road that they're showing is not accurate. The road clearly goes through the Kramer property. We have decades of easement going back. We have all of this paperwork that we have submitted showing that the road goes through our property. Mr. Hughes himself paid us $6,000 for an easement, so he is very much aware that that road goes through our property. The ironic thing about this entire thing with Josh and Vlad is that initially we weren't opposed to a Verizon tower going up there. We are all for service for everyone. We have zero problems with that. They came out and told us what was going to happen and would not work with us. They were underhanded in their dealings with me when they came out and low-key threatening about other things, and it was not okay. So that is the ironic part, is that we weren't opposed, but they're telling us that our road's not where our road is. Even Stimson came out, surveyed their land, logged their land, put up flags that are clearly on the other side of the road. Vlad himself, I took him out there, I showed him. It is clearly on the other side of the road. According to his surveys, half of our house isn't on our property, according to these surveys that he's pulling up. So that's obviously not accurate. Stormhog came out, they surveyed the property right next to us that we share a corner with. There's a monument in the road. If you take that monument, you go down, following the property line, it clearly shows that the road goes on our property. So that is the only issue that we had with it initially. Now, of course, you've seen that my husband is completely opposed to them coming out entirely because of this.
Thank you. Okay, do we have anybody on Zoom?
If there's anybody on Zoom that would like to speak to this application, go ahead and unmute yourself. I don't think so.
No. And just to be certain, there wasn't anybody else in the room that didn't fill out a blue piece of paper to speak tonight? Or not speak, but to register in favor, opposed, or neutral? Okay, then we're ready for applicant rebuttal.
Thank you, Madam Hearing Examiner. Josh Leonard, 251 East Front Street, Suite 310, Boise, 83616. I'm gonna let Steve, I think, probably talk, or maybe Shelley talk about the time frame for construction.
It's on a card, but we were introduced.
It was, yeah, you were introduced.
So I think you guys do.
Mike?
It's okay. You can speak.
We introduced you.
Right.
Sorry to spring that on you, Mike.
You should.
That's all right.
Time frame for construction, how long will it take and when would it start?
And name and address first.
Michael Mathieson.
Okay.
I live at 9120 Dock Bar Court, Elk Grove, California. Approximate time for construction will be about 2 months. Of course, we have to, once we get a building permit. So we have to file, we will file for building permit plans, and then we'll start construction after that. So depending on how long it takes to do the building permit.
Perfect.
And I have a question. The components to assemble a tower like this are readily available these days?
Yes, there's several tower manufacturers that build towers, and then they ship them on trucks to a location.
Okay. Not like cars, huh? That we have to wait 6-10 months to get.
You almost have to order them before they're off
Yeah.
on the line, for sure. One of the questions that was raised was about erosion and wildlife concerns. To that point, the federal government requires an applicant for something like this to go through a process of getting it approved and submitting it to the Federal Communications Commission, and identify any cultural, wildlife, or geological concerns, and prove to the satisfaction of the federal government that those can be either mitigated or that the site can be slightly modified or moved, in which case we would have to come back here to do an amended CUP.
And that study will take place when, and how long does it take?
Yeah, exactly. Prior to building permit is when we have to have that done. So, I recognize that these types of hearings can be emotional for people that live in the area, and I appreciate that. I don't appreciate being called a liar, and I don't appreciate being threatened, and I won't stand for it. I recognize, again, that they are emotional about it. We are a nation of laws, and we are here to do this the right way. We have not lied about coverage. Anecdotal evidence from one person that she may have carried a call is not evidence. The only probative evidence before the hearing examiner today is Stephen Kennedy's exhaustive and reconfirmed evidence. No data has been provided to suggest that coverage is anything other than what Stephen Kennedy identified it to be. I'm going to get to the lowest property value piece in just a moment, but I'm going to jump. The roads with regard to access, one of the people who testified said that they had submitted all of this paperwork. The only documentary evidence in the record was submitted by the applicants. To my knowledge, there is no other surveys, no other surveyor weighing in other than the applicant surveyor. And the only information in the record, other than testimony about where flagged wooden lathe monuments are on the ground, is from the applicant. I'm going to resume my presentation from a few moments ago.
Okay.
And we'll get moving through it pretty quickly so we can cover it. If I can ask, how much time do we have in rebuttal?
2 minutes, 40 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
But when I ask questions, your time is not,
Perfect.
right, thank you.
Thank you very much. As we said at the outset, this site is the only viable option, and we went through that list. I'm going to encourage you, the hearing examiner, Madam Hearing Examiner, to look through those reasons. There are no existing towers within 2 miles. In fact, I believe the closest is approximately 4 or 5 miles away. So there's not no ability for us to provide coverage to this significant gap absent this tower. Residential growth and increased highway traffic obviously increases demand for reliable wireless service. I don't remember if Stephen, if you mentioned it, but prior to today's hearing, Stephen pulled the traffic numbers for that part of I-90, immediately where that comes through. The average daily car trips at that point of I-90 are 14,200 in 2022. That's average daily car trips that pass on I-90 right there. Those are car trips that currently do not have satisfactory coverage and that will have satisfactory coverage with this tower. First responder information, we're going to leave this to Madam Hearing Examiner to cover and review. This is just that, as was stated by the fire chief, better communications equals better public safety. So one other thing that I wanted to mention that's unique about Kootenai County Code, it's divided into two types of, or into two areas. The first is application requirements, not standards for approval. The next is standards for approval. Application requirements, primarily it's the planner who goes through and determines that those are there. It has to be confirmed by the Madam Hearing Examiner in her recommendation, and then again by the Board of County Commissioners. But the initial review of that is up to the planner. In this case, we have met or exceeded all of the requirements for our application submittal. More importantly, though, are the standards for approval. This is the reason that we ask Madam Hearing Examiner to recommend approval of our application. We meet these, we meet all of these. It's a 150-foot tower. It meets the setback requirements. It's 436 feet to the north property line, 173 feet to the south, 641 to the east, and 604 to the west. There's no restricted residential or high-density residential zones adjacent, and there's no existing WCF on the property. Going down through here, these have all been met by the applicant. Agency comments, in this instance, there were no agencies that recommended denial. It was all either no comment, or you'll need to meet some building code requirements, or there's additional conditions that need to be met. My favorite at the bottom, or excuse me, right here, Vlad mentioned it, having this cell tower placed would greatly aid in cell communications in the area, which is always a positive for fire EMS communications. I strongly support this tower. I'm going to leave the federal telecommunications for you to review. I don't need to go into too much depth with that. I'm going to jump into some rebuttal really quick. The first thing I want to point out is that the person that testified about property values said that it's a 10% drop on residences within 1,000 feet of a site. Maybe he said 1,000 or 1,200 feet. It was something along those lines. There are no residences within 1,000 feet of this site. So even if that were true, and I challenge that it's not, even if it were true, it wouldn't apply to residences around this site because there are none within 1,000 feet. I'm also going to provide some evidence here talking about how or why I believe that there isn't an effect. In 2018, Valbridge Property Advisors, a major U.S. property management company and property advising company, conducted a study of 4 major markets. Recognizing that Coeur d'Alene and just outside Coeur d'Alene and Kootenai County aren't Boston, Dallas, Phoenix, and Raleigh, this is just instructive as opposed to direct. In those studies, though, they found negligible to no effect on home sale values within the quarter-mile radius. Quarter mile, again, about 1,250 square feet. Of those 4 areas, there was, in one of them, no measurable effect on property values. In another, no negative effect on property values. In one of them, less than 1% in both the increasing and decreasing home price indications. Here's a member or a fellow in Silicon Valley talking about the fact that the devaluation of residential real estate doesn't show up in objective peer-reviewed studies. There's a belief that it persists. There's a belief that persists, but in peer-reviewed studies, it doesn't actually show up. This is, to me, the most telling piece of information, or the most probative piece of evidence and testimony. In 2018, in a hearing that was happening on a cell tower in Ada County, staff went to the horse's mouth, so to speak, went to the county assessor and asked, what's the impact? And the bottom line there, the overall effect in the market is very minimal. In fact, we have not been able to find any measurable adjustment in the market. Based on that, Your Honor, Madam Hearing Examiner, we would ask for a recommendation of approval of our tower, and we would stand for questions.
Thank you. Vlad, you have something you want to add?
I do, I don't necessarily know if it's the right time, but whether or not Mr. Leonard needs to provide additional testimony or rebut my statement. Is it okay if I provide additional information?
Please.
Ms. Kramer came up to the podium and she, when she addressed you, she stated that she provided information. I do want to clarify into the record that I had communication with Ms. Kramer on site, as well as via email, and her husband as well. They have provided documents, recorded access easements that were granted by Ms. Kramer and her husband to Mr. Hughes. Those documents did not include records of survey that would demonstrate, if that's the right legal term, maybe Mr. Leonard can address that, but our legal counsel, when we discussed that with him, the access easements did not demonstrate or confirm the location of the road and whether or not was trespassing onto the Kramer's property. That being said, I was advised that those documents do not have relevant or relevance to the case because they do not justify the location of the road. The easement itself is merely an access right versus a geographical confirmation of existing road location. Once again, there was no record of survey. Ms. Kramer did indicate to me that there were stakes. I did see those stakes. I did have the discussion with our legal counsel and our staff, and we advised the Kramers that while we understand their concern and their position, the only way for us to be able to confirm what they're stating is to be correct was to have them submit a record of survey stamped by a licensed surveyor that would dispute the analysis and the survey submitted by the Verizon Wireless representative land use surveyor. That has not occurred. That information was not placed into the record because of it being found to be not relevant to the matter. And during the public comment period, we did not receive any public comments from the Kramers to once again support their opposition or their claim that the road is traversing through their property. Therefore, it's not part of the record. I just want to make that clear on the record. If Mr. Leonard needs to elaborate on that or rebut staff's testimony, perhaps that's the right time. But I want to make sure that I did have communication with the Kramers at their site as well as, or near their property. Ms. Kramer was kind enough to show me where the road was headed off to the Hughes parcel, as well as via email.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Do you have anything to add?
Actually, I think that was perfectly stated. I don't need to rebut anything in that. I think that was exactly correct.
Okay. I have probably heard, I don't know, 4 or 5 wireless tower applications since I've been doing this, and thank you for the detail in your explanation. I appreciated it. And that concludes our hearing for this evening on case number CUP 24-0003. Thank you all for your attendance.